Let's talk herd.
There was a time, I think Gideon was maybe like 10. I was competing in dressage at the time, and there was a real marker point. I was in a dressage. I was in the outdoor arena at the farm where I boarded. There were 2 other trainers working in there. One was a jumper trainer who was teaching a lesson, and then the other was the dressage trainer that owned the barn. She was doing some practice stuff. I was practicing my test, and they all knew that, so they were being very respectful of me needing to go certain places in the arena. And I trotted Gideon down the center line, and I halted in the middle, and I saluted. And then I put my legs on very gently and asked him to go, and he was rooted to the ground. And I thought, well, okay, I didn't ask correctly or something. I tried a few things, and he just stayed rooted. And he said, and every now and again when he really wants to get something across, he can actually speak into a human's mind. And he said, we're at a crossroads, and you have a choice to make. And I thought, oh, this is heavy. And in the meantime, all these horses are riding around us, looking at me like, and why aren't you going? Why are you hogging the middle of the arena? You know, I mean, and he said, you can either do things the way you've been doing them, or you can follow me down a different path. And I was like, okay, well, wow, the sense of import in that moment was enormous. It was a very weighty decision I had to make, because I could use my stick and get him going, or I could listen to him and let him teach me. So I chose to go with him, and I went through my whole body softening things, trying to figure out what he was trying to teach me, all of this in silence while these people are vibing me very heavily. And it was when I released the muscles in my forearm, which I did not even know were tight, that he just sprang off into a trot.
Wow.
And went around and did then we were able to do the whole test. But it taught me something so cellularly important about how much our bodies affect theirs, even when we're not aware of what we're doing. Yeah, and that choice was enormous. So I've been going down the rabbit hole with him ever since.
Yeah, that just kind of gives me goosebumps, because it feels so resonant with what I've been discovering through, like, the power of energy and how much you can feel just, you know, when you're not doing anything.
Yes.
You can feel how it would feel, and you can feel.
Yes.
And I wanted to go back to what you said about the riding, because it's a big deal, that, and I don't understand why it's not more understood. What I would call engagement, that's the word that me and my sister always used for it. And it's, you know, it's a physiological fact that the horse has a postural ring, and that we have a postural ring, and that those 2 rings work together. And it's nothing, like you say, it's nothing to do with the mouth or the bit, but there are certain effects, like that a horse will telescope their neck, they'll relax their jaw, they'll kind of chew, even without a bit, they'll create some foam. You know, it's a physical thing. And my sister did some research and found that the closest thing in nature to that is actually the way that dolphins swim in the sea, and the way that they propel themselves through the waves.
Oh, interesting.
They do that with their postural ring, because it wasn't really understood how they could do that with such strength. Because they're so they're kind of small for the strength that output to be able to do that in these massive waves. And they do it with their postural ring. And that's what we're doing when we ride. And it's like amazing. And so few people seem to really get that. I mean, I'm not, a lot of people do.
Oh, yeah.
But you would think it would just be a bigger thing, you know, more understood that it's in our bodies. But I think it is because it's quite a long training, and it's quite demanding of you physically, because you have to, but it really, like you say, it's all about us as a rider. Like everything we do in our body just is mirrored by the horse, and it's fantastic. And I think the only limitations sometimes are physical ones in us and in the horses, but it is so it's deeply therapeutic for both of us. And that's what I would love for people to know more,
yes.
You know, about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's why I call my business the way of the horse, because it is a way, it is a path, and it does involve all 4 of the levels. You know, there's a spiritual element to riding, and there is physical and emotional and mental. So first we learn, you know, I think what happened, Camille, is that the masters from Europe who had been on the lunge, you know, the way they started people to truly ride in Europe was to be on the lunge line for 2 years.
Yeah.
No reins, no stirrups, on differing horses who taught them different things. And you have to find your posture. You have to find your postural ring. If you're sitting on a horse being lunged, walk, trot, and canter, and doing all these crazy exercises to find your balance and find softness and strength. So I call it tone. There's no tension, but you're quite strong. It's like the martial artists. It's a martial artist type of strength where you're soft and yet incredibly strong, as you well know. And I think, like one student of mine, shortly before she stopped riding with me, said, this kind of riding is tedious. I said,
oh my God.
Could you please explain what you mean by that word? Because I was just like, tedious. To me, it's absolutely fascinating, right? So she said, well, you have to be aware of yourself all the time. I just want to have fun. And I thought, well, that kind of sums up the 2 different things in a nutshell, where people don't want to do the inner work because it requires dedication. And it requires a devotion to the fundamentals, where if one part of balance is missing, you don't just ignore that and go on. You go back and remember or remind the body of that balance. You must be 4 square, well, or 6 square if you think about the rider and the horse. I say to my students when they're ready to hear this, because too early on and they'll just freak out, but there are 6 sides to a horse. There's front and back, left and right, and top and bottom. And there are 6 sides to us as well. And so all 12 of those must be in synchronicity. And that takes time and patience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
And so I think I started to say the European riders came to other places to teach, like America and other places from Europe, and they discovered that folks didn't have the patience to learn how to ride correctly. So in order to protect the horses, they had people put their hands down low so they could brace on the saddle or the horse's neck or withers, so their hands would stop bouncing around all over the place, and had them lean forward slightly so that they weren't pounding on the horses' backs, and then they just taught them from there and left out all the foundation stuff. And then people thought, oh, this is how we're supposed to ride, and now it's getting passed down, and it's all about the hand being a brake and the legs being the gas, and left rein, right rein for steering, and it's an abomination, but they don't know it. They don't know it. It's really hard on the horses.
That's really fascinating. That's a really interesting way to see it, because it really is, for me, it's always been, or not always, but since I kind of understood a bit more about engagement, there's an exercise that we always did with people.
Yeah.
To get them to feel the wave of the horse's movement. So we would ask them to lie back as far as they could go, almost to kind of lie on the horse's back, and then come back up again, but very slowly, just using their core muscles, and to stop at the point when they felt like they were really with the horse's movement. Mm-hmm. And when they did that correctly, mm-hmm. they would often be leaning quite far back. And then obviously, as you gain more strength in your core, you can sit more and more and more upright. But it shows that most of the time, people are just slightly ahead of the movement. And that's exactly what you're saying. That to be connected to the movement, you then have to connect your seat to the horse's back. And you have to be able to allow all of that power and those huge strides to go through your seat and through your whole body. And so you have to be flexible enough for that. And it is much easier just to kind of tip slightly forward out of that dynamic and just kind of control. It's a little bit like a handbrake then on the horse's back. Your seat bones are kind of going back into the horse's back.
Yes.
And then you need spurs. You need to make the horse go.
Mm-hmm. All because we're stopping them.
Yeah.
The seat bones, I find most people are on the pointy part of their seat bone instead of the flat part.
Yeah, exactly.
When they lean forward, they're on the front, they're on the pointy part. Yes, and as you say, it stops the hind legs from being able to move forward, as does low hands.
Yeah.
That also stops the hind legs from moving forward. But when they when they come just that little bit behind the vertical as a beginner, then they're able to maintain that postural ring and stay off the front of their seat bone. I agree with you, 100%. Yes, and eventually they come into vertical.
Yeah, and like mm-hmm. you say, it is definitely a process, and you have to. I think probably the main mistake, for want of a better word, that a teacher will make is to try and create the perfect posture today, because it's not a posture, it's a dynamic, it's a riding dynamic. So you have to prioritize the seat first so that the seat can become strong enough and the core muscle can become strong enough, and then you train the leg, because the leg needs to be able to come under as part of the leverage system. But if you try and correct the leg too soon, then the seat's going to pop out forward. So it really is, we have, like you say, on the lunge, like what we did, because we couldn't really lunge each other all the time, we just rode without a contact, like with really long reins and without saddles for ages, because we couldn't find a saddle that we wanted. And we just learned to kind of feel that balance. Yeah, because that's the other huge thing, is where your weight should be to balance the horse. And because the horse tends to push us to the outside all the time, more on one rein than the other, and you have to be able to resist that and put yourself in the place where the horse can truly come under you, and that's straightness. And that again is another way of initiating that postural ring. So, but you can't do all of those things at once on the same day. You have to build up to it and get the strength, and it takes time. And yeah, it's true that a lot of us just want to get out there and just have that buzz that you get when you're, that it is an amazing buzz when you're galloping across country and jumping jumps, or when you're doing a jump off or something. It's incredible. But it's just such a different thing. I suppose it's a bit like the difference between meditating and, and going on a roller coaster, or even just, anything that's more doing.
Meditation or drugs.
Yeah. So maybe it's an age thing, as we get older.
Well, it does help to be older, but I do find more and more younger students who are starting to come because they realize, well, usually they have a horse that just doesn't do well with the old way. They know that they need to find a different way to be able to ride this horse. Like I had a lady in the last clinic I did, and her horse was just fussing with his head. And of course, it was only her second and third lesson that she was learning to be more stable. But I thought maybe he really didn't like his bit, and so we tried a few different bits. But what it turned out was, when I finally got her stable in her hand and arm and stopped her from using her fingers and hands and just let him feel her back through the reins, all of that went away. It had nothing to do with the bit. It had to do with her and her stability. And boy, she had such a light bulb moment, and she was all in because that was magical to her.
Yeah. Do you find, I don't know why this popped into my head, but do you find that horses need to rediscover or redevelop the sense that they can make a choice, or that they have a choice or an opinion? Or do you find that that's a difficult road to go down? Because I suppose you have to trust where it's going to lead. But do you find when you're teaching people that ever comes up as an issue, that you feel like the horse needs to be able to make choices and have a voice? Well,
I think it depends on the horse. So most horses, I find, so when excuse me, when I meet a horse for the first time, I introduce myself to them, and I tell them why I'm there, because of course I walk in with trainer energy all over me, and a lot of horses either shut down or get very anxious. And I say to them, look, I'm here to help your rider be better on you and understand you better. And I said, what I need your input on this, and please feel free to give us input as they learn. Wow. I would ask you, please, to do it in a safe way and a gentle way. And I find that they calm right down. The horses that have been shut down and have the learned hopelessness, those that have just been repeatedly overridden, their opinions have been overridden, they start to wake up and they really get into it. They're very, very into it. And there's, wait, I had a thought and it went away. Let me see. I have not found that the horse says, no, I don't want to do what you're asking me to do, because in the first few lessons, it's all about the rider. So it's just, let's just walk and halt and turn and trot. And so we're not asking them to do anything. But then by the time we get to the point where they are asking them to do things, then I find the biggest thing that the horses do is they will refuse to go forward. They just plant their feet like Gideon did with me. And because they're saying to their rider, okay, you're ready now to learn more about energy and how to ask for these up transitions and down transitions energetically rather than physically. And that is a hard part for the riders to get through. They get frustrated and the horses just are like calmly standing there. I'm just waiting for you to find this. And so that's mainly where it shows up for me in with the horses that I work with, is they all go through that planting stage where they just say, no, now we're asking you to learn a different level. Some people don't have the patience to go there. Most choose to do so, and once they find it, again, their face lights up because it's like magic. So
that reminds me of a mare that I had, and she was so sensitive like that, and she would just stop. And at first I thought it was just about the ride. It was usually because they tipped a little bit forward, or
yes,
something like that. But I did realize in the end that it was exactly what you say. It was like a quantum leap she was asking, because when people could get into that, transmitting through the energy, their intention, and really feel it, she just became electricity itself. She was unbelievable, and she would do everything just from their intention.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful. It really is. And I love what you say about when you're teaching the horses or the people, and you're giving the horses that channel. That just feels so powerful to me, that you can, just ask them for their input like that, in that way. It feels really integrating the whole situation. Like it's not all or nothing, which is something that I've kind of, I wouldn't say struggle, but it's a difficult one to solve, because I felt like I had to kind of put everything that I knew aside and just listen to the horses. And I think in a way that was quite a big thing to ask from them, because and in a way it's turned into that we're doing something that's maybe what the future of horsemanship might be eventually. Like, so it is purely the transmission between us, and it doesn't rely on other things like the equipment or anything. But I think the bigger the kind of, it's almost like you set yourself, like if you set yourself this huge goal, you have to then go so much further to fulfill it. And that feels a lot more, the way that you're talking about feels a lot less challenging. It's just more, it's more practical, really. And it's really a really nice way to introduce the idea of choice.
Thank you. I try to make things practical for people, so it's relatable to them and not some lofty goal that they may or may not be able to attain. And in that beginning dialogue, when I'm talking out loud to their horses and saying these things, it's helping shift a paradigm in them.
Yeah.
I am saying, I want your input on this. And it's covering so many territories. Number one, I'm speaking to the horse as a sentient being, and the horses are clearly understanding and responding to what I am saying, and that way it just bypasses all the talking and the trying to convince and the this and the that. I just do my best to bypass all that stuff, because really what it boils down to is we're shifting paradigms here.
Yeah.
The horse, we're going from the horse, we're shifting from a horse as a tool, because that's been centuries where the horse has been a tool, to the horse as a sentient partner. I mean, then there's the whole concept of sentience. Most people don't think their horses are very bright. They come in because their horse is a problem, and rapidly they realize that's not so much the case. the horse is willing to work with them as long as it is a partnership. And then there's the whole concept of the horse is allowed to have input, because most people are not taught that horses are allowed to have input. No. We discourage, no, that's called resistance. No, it's not. It's input.
Exactly.
And so if I can just introduce all of that in the first 5 minutes by talking to their horses, it's a subconscious thing. It's going in on an unconscious level, perhaps I should say, in a way that affects people on a cellular level. Yeah.
It feels to me like you're actually just believing in the horse.
Yes.
Like you're believing in, that they have chosen to be there, and that they have, that they have opinions, and that they are willing to give them, and that they're on our side. And it's a very liberating.
On our side, yes.
It just feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They do want to help us.
Yeah.
And the horses are so grateful.
Yeah. They really are, aren't they? I always feel that I'm a little bit surprised by that, but then it always feels so authentic when their true voice, the generosity that is just in, like, their open-heartedness, and how much they love us. I don't think we let ourselves really receive that. And if we did, we wouldn't be so hard on ourselves, and we would probably be able to connect with them better, because we would just see that we're all in it together, and we're all, it's, nobody has to be perfect, and we're doing our best. So
yes,
I think that's sometimes what puts people off from becoming a bit more awakened, I suppose, because they feel like it's, you have to just become like this perfect spiritual being, and it's not really that can't be a reality for people, because it just doesn't really make sense. So it's so much easier to see it in terms of that we're friends. We're just friends, and we're living this together, and we're just kind of doing what feels good together, and there's no rules, and that we can't, we're not doing anything wrong. And it's a really nice way of having them in our lives.
Yes.